A lot of people, when they hear the word personal branding, they just think it's quite icky and cringy because they're like, oh, it's all about self-promotion. However, personal branding for me and the way that I coach my clients is think about it as ideas promotion. And Adam Grant was the one that came up with this, and I absolutely love it.
Well, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Brand My Career podcast. And today I have Abbey Naylor on with me. Abbey is a personal brand coach and LinkedIn strategist, helping people build influence on LinkedIn. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Alex.
So Abbey, I have to start the episode with a thank you because it was about 11 months ago when I first made the decision that I was going to get active on LinkedIn. And one of the first sort of pages I came across was yourself, and I found the LinkedIn cheat sheet that you have on your website, downloaded it, and that was a really great way to get me started on LinkedIn and get me up and going. So, yeah, I owe everything I'm doing to you.
Oh, stop it. Incredible. I'm glad that, my LinkedIn cheat sheet could, help you get started.
Yeah, no, it was extremely helpful, really practical, simple, something that I could actually do. So, yeah, if you can help me do something decent, then you're doing something good.
Oh, awesome. And look at you now.
What episode? This will be episode maybe 23, I think, of the podcast.
Incredible.
So going well. But I thought before we deep dive right into all things LinkedIn, would you maybe want to share a bit about your career journey that's brought you to what you're doing now?
Yeah, of course. So long story short, I won't give you the whole story, but when I first moved to Newcastle, I first initially started, I dipped my toes in HR and recruitment. And at the time, I didn't really know what HR recruitment was. I originally wanted to be a teacher when I first left school and studied that for a little bit. Anyways, and then I worked for a mining company at the time. And even though I didn't quite I knew it was a stepping stone. And what it did is it got my foot in the door of a business. And I then understood everything from, supply chain, leadership. And I had really great mentors there. And then I loved this side of recruitment where it was just helping people in their careers. However, I am a creative at heart, and there was just something missing for me. And it was that, it was that creative marketing component. And it wasn't until that I worked with the marketing team, they didn't really have a social media. And I was sitting with the head of marketing, and I was like, oh, we could get referrals in like this. We could get the social media running like this, and just kind of running ideas with the marketing team. Anyways, it wasn't until I think it was 2019, 2020, I left that role and I started at a recruitment agency in the marketing team, which was awesome. And then in that role, I just, under that umbrella, I did social media management, event management, community management, internal events, and also personal branding, copywriting, and things like that. So what was really great in that role was I was a generalist, and I got to dip my toes in a lot of different departments underneath that umbrella until I fell in love with personal branding. And because I started during that COVID period at my previous corporate gig, all the recruiters were obviously, when they did their client visits and their BD, it was in person. So they had all this experience and this expertise. However, to articulate that online and connect with people online and share their value and become industry leaders in what they do to align with the business I was working for, there was a bit of a gap there. So I really studied personal branding. I listened to all the podcasts that I could. I started just experimenting on LinkedIn thanks to my boss. She really pushed me because I was using LinkedIn as a recruiter tool. I was like, I didn't even know it was this marketing tool. Anyway, so that's what really kind of opened my eyes to personal branding. And here I am.
Yeah, quite a journey, and yeah, all kinds of experiences that have clearly helped you build the skill sets and everything for what you're doing now. In terms of going out and starting Bold Mood, what's been the best, most fun part of doing that, and what's been the hardest?
The fun part is just meeting a lot of, so I probably the best thing is working with a variety of different people and helping them in different ways. So there's not a one size fits all strategy on LinkedIn for my clients. Like, everyone has different lifestyles, everyone has different goals. So my core, I love hearing about people's stories. I just remember as a kid, like I would always be that type of person that would open, I would love celebrity mags and like magazines and just love learning about like people's stories and how they got to where they are. And I think with personal branding, like the foundations piece of understanding of how that person got to where they are and what makes them unique and stand out in their kind of career or business. That's my favorite component. The toughest the toughest part to Bold Mood is obviously you're really great at your craft, but when you run your own business, you wear all the hats. So,
Mm-hmm.
say if you struggled with self doubt or if you struggled with confidence or anything like that, when you start your own business, those things are really heightened. So, my advice would be invest in your mindset. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, isn't it? Even for me, like doing the podcast and stuff, you definitely, as soon as there's just something about it when you own the thing that you attach all kinds of deep emotions to it, and you get all these
Yeah,
insecurities and these feelings popping up. Oh, and the, you know, if there's not as many listens on something as you might hope for, and then you start applying all of these messages to it about who you are as a person, then you just the thing that I've
absolutely. And you kind
used.
of spiral because what
Yeah,
happens is everyone has these mindset blockages. If it's perfectionism, if it's fear of judgment, or if it's imposter syndrome, all of these mindset blockages, like we are human and we're going to experience that. I think, yeah, it's just really wise to kind of just like separate the thought from the feeling, I think. And it's just like every thought that pops into your mind isn't the truth. It's sometimes your brain just trying to keep you safe. So it's like the way to kind of work through that is just keep going and keep experimenting and taking action, because that will eventually fade.
yeah, that's it. Let's have
Yeah.
fun with it.
Yeah.
Um, Before we dive into some of the technical things of LinkedIn, do you want to just share what's your, I guess, personal philosophy of what personal branding is?
So personal branding for me is just really understanding who you are as a person, and yeah, understanding who you are as a person down to your core. So, like, what do you want to be known for? Who do you want to help? How do you help that person get there? It's about sharing your value. And I think a lot of people, when they hear the word personal branding, they just think it's quite icky and cringy because they're like, oh, it's all about self promotion. However, personal branding for me and the way that I coach my clients is think about it as ideas promotion. And Adam Grant was the one that came up with this. And I absolutely love it because when you hear the word personal branding, a lot of people just, yeah, probably think like, oh, look at me. It's all about self promotion. However, when you flip the script and think of it as ideas promotion, that's when you understand that it's about sharing your value. It's about sharing your expertise and your knowledge. And if you are sharing content and engaging with people, and in the back of your mind at all times you're thinking, how is this serving my ideal client, my audience, and is this adding value? So personal branding to me is all about like really understanding who you are and sharing that value.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone is new to LinkedIn. What is the first thing that you think that they should be doing?
The first thing that they should do is definitely optimize their profile to make sure it aligns to who they are, who they are targeting, and the solution and result around what they do get for their target audience. So before jumping into your profile and just hoping for the best, updating your headline, your banner, and everything like that. Take a step back, and I like to call it the foundations piece. So I work with my clients to really work on their what their goals are, because everyone's goals are so different on LinkedIn. So it might be to grow your audience, it might be to get a promotion, it might be to start a side gig, like grow your influence and things like that. So your goal is going to be different your goal is going to be different for everyone. Understanding exactly what you want to be known for, what your strengths are, target audience, and just really understanding what your unique value proposition is in the market. Because a lot of people like might just have their headline marketing consultant, for example, and you just have to think like how many other marketing consultants are there in the world. So it's like, if you actually want to be noticed and stand out from the crowd, you've actually got to go that step further and dig a little bit deeper to why you are doing, like, what is your why, like what is your purpose here, and not just for searchability, but just so there's a billion people on LinkedIn. And I think there's about 310 million people that are active on there. So it's like, what's going to make you stand out? So I will always swear by setting the foundations first and digging deeper on what your why is, and those fundamentals. So then when you go to optimize your profile, it's a lot more fluent.
Yeah, you've got a context that you're working within rather than really machine fire, and then
Yeah.
it
And
ends up really random.
exactly. And I think a lot of people, when they do start on LinkedIn, they just think it's content. They're like, yep, I'm going to punch out 5 posts and I'm going to go, go, go. And they don't stay consistent with it, because it's like, one, they're not probably getting engagement because they don't understand what their purpose is online. They're just kind of sharing random content. And then no one's like, it's not targeting the right person because you don't know who you're actually targeting. So yeah, I will always say to people, if you are new to LinkedIn, always set the foundations first, and yeah, before you start kind of like creating content and things like that. Because when people land on your profile, they want to understand like yeah, who you are, what you do, how you help people get to from A to B.
Yeah. If you were, say, you're using LinkedIn as a strategy for job seeking versus using it for more of a building personal brand more broadly, what would be the differences in techniques that you would use, say, as a job seeker?
So, if you were a job seeker, what I would highly recommend is just understanding what industry that you want to either start in, or if it's if you have your eye on a company or an industry, then I would highly recommend typing in the search bar that industry if there's keywords associated with that industry, and start following people that are relevant in that industry. So, say if you go to a company and you're like, I really want to work for Mecca. So you start following Mecca, but also you start following the employees and the leaders within that company on LinkedIn. Start engaging with them and their content. And what that will do is that will slowly just start getting your name out there. So when you do reach out to them, they understand. They're like, oh, Abby, like, yeah, is in my network. She actually, yeah. So even when you are, and don't just send a connection request, always add a personalization to it. So, hey, I'm Abby. Great to connect. Thanks for, it looks like you're sharing like awesome content, or just something like really personalized. So it just kind of gives people a bit of an insight of who you are and what your personality is.
I always get stuck on when you send a connection piece and you're wanting to say something, but it's always funny because it's kind of like the equivalent of like sparking up a conversation, right? Like at a networking event, say, and often trying to work out the right question or thing to say that doesn't feel like really jolted and gives them the ability to engage with it without it sort of being like, oh, like I don't know what to do with that. Because particularly if it's something you don't know, but you just sort of think that might be a person that will be aligned and enjoys my content, or that I might want to follow their content, or maybe that's someone I'd like to interview on the show, all those things. And you're trying to work out the right question to ask. And sometimes you ask it and then you're looking at going, oh, was that this like really awkward?
No, so if you do feel like that, and I understand because that's what I used to feel like community management and sliding into people's DMs wasn't a natural thing for me at the start until I built a bit of a strategy that worked for me. Because a lot of people say, yeah, like reach out to 25 people a week to grow your audience and connect, like comment on people's posts and that, which is super important to grow your audience and get your name out there. However, it needs to align with you and your messaging, because I find cold messaging and calling, like it doesn't align with me. Like, so the way that I go about it is just having a conversation. So for example, if you're following someone or someone follows you, reach out to that person and go, hey Alex, great, so lovely to connect with you. I just checked out your profile and I really love your recent post about this and this. So just kind of like give them a bit of like, know that you've actually you've made the effort to go into their profile or connect with them and understand what their kind of like their personal brand is or what they've created content on, and complement that. And just go, I'm looking forward to staying connected and following your journey on LinkedIn. Let me know if there's a way that we can support each other.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, just something like that to start the conversation. It doesn't need to be like, I think it's like people just like, hey, thanks for connecting or something like that. It kind of just falls flat because most people kind of do just go to that default. So yeah, you will definitely stand out if you add more of that personalization.
Yeah, and vice versa on return of if you've just sent a connection request and then they come back and with a comment, it's huge difference. Like, so that's how some people have ended up as guests on my podcast, is the ones that, so particularly I was living in Bathurst and I was like, all right, I'm about to move to Newcastle. I have 12 connections on my LinkedIn page and I'm about to know no one. And that's where I made that decision to get intentional on LinkedIn. And so I thought, I'm going to start finding people in Newcastle and I'm just going to start making connections just as a starting point. But so Tegan, who came on the show, so I'd sent her a connection request because I sort of found rare kind and I thought recruiters are people I'm keen to be connected with. And then she's replied saying, hey, welcome to Newcastle, like really friendly. I was like, oh, thanks. I wish you, catch up sometime. So I've caught up for a coffee and asked her to come on the show and things like that. And so it's all based off of the response and the way you reach out to someone. And the same for Laura Allen. And that one was interesting because it was like that same day I'd sent 2 connections to 2 people, very similar. One responded like this with a really authentic conversation. And then there was another, and it sort of came back with a bit more of a sales pitch of like,
yes,
trying to then sell me straight away. And so this created this huge difference in terms of like, one, we ended up building a good connection, had her on the show. We touch base at times. I'll ask her questions. We'll spitball things and stuff, versus one that immediately went for the sale and then this didn't really go anywhere.
Exactly. And I think with that kind of, that's a great example of how important building rapport is. And don't get me wrong, like being in business sales is a massive component to that, but there's definitely a strategy behind that. And if you're just connecting with someone, I think that rapport is very important before you just throw that sales pitch at them, because you don't really understand if they need what you're offering kind of thing. So just getting to know the person first. And I will give you a tip though, if keeping up with DMs and things like that. So say if you're connected with a person, and keeping up with messages and DMs is an extreme sport for you, I would highly recommend using the voice note on your phone. So you can, a lot of people do use the voice note just because if they're running between like meetings and things like that, it is quite easy. And that's another way to kind of just like introduce yourself and show your tone of voice, and your personality can obviously shine through a lot more compared to, sometimes over text.
Yeah, no, that is good. I have had some people do that as well. And it's, I remember the first time I had it, I was sort of like, oh, this is different. And then other times it's just felt really natural and has worked really well. So that's a good one. You could even, I guess you don't want to pre-record one, but you want to do it
I don't know, because they only allow you a minute, which is great because some of my girlfriends, they all live in different states, and when they voice note me, it's like a mini podcast app. And I'm just standing there listening to it for 20 minutes. I'm like, okay, by the end I go to reply, I forget half of the stuff that's in it. So I'm glad that they're only a minute because people can go off on a tangent, me included. So I'm
That'd be a
glad
good
they.
way to get a podcast then, you just send people notes. Stitch it all together.
Yeah.
What percentage of people, and you don't have to have actual stats on this, but that actually, I guess, get headhunted through LinkedIn?
Oh, I would probably say 95%.
That's
So,
crazy.
so look, depending, I guess it depends what industry you're in. So thinking more like white collar, kind of creative, anything like that, I would say, yeah, people, recruiters, like working in the recruitment industry, when I first started, if I had LinkedIn was one of the first questions they asked me because we live in a digital age now. So it's where like your LinkedIn is pretty much your portfolio. So the how you're engaging, how your profile is optimized, and your experience, if it's up to date, your about me section to kind of let people in on your career story and your how you help people and things like that. I would say, yeah, most recruiters look at LinkedIn first. If you're in that trades kind of industry, I would say LinkedIn is still super important and headhunters always are going to LinkedIn first, but they might have to get a little bit more creative with in the tradie sector. They might be looking on like other platforms for that too.
Yeah. Definitely agree with it. Depends. And this is where like the way you present yourself on LinkedIn. So I don't think I've ever had a recruiter reach out to me and say, "Hey, are you interested in this role?" My wife's a legal assistant.
Yeah.
It's all that happens to her on LinkedIn is recruiters like
Yeah.
asking her if she's looking for work because everyone wants a legal assistant. So it's just funny the way that it plays out differently, but it does just speak to the way that you set up your profile is going to determine how it's engaged with.
And as well as a lot of recruiters are using Sales Navigator. So if they have premium, which most recruiters and employers would, the way that they would be finding your wife is through like targeting. So they would have like all the keywords that your wife is using on her profile, for example, or they would be their key. The recruiters would be, they could see that in Sales Navigator, like fully targeting the people that have that headline or those like that experience kind of thing. Yeah.
So thinking, what are all the different things when you talk about optimizing a profile?
Yeah.
What are maybe, I guess, like the top things, all the different components of a profile that people can be looking at?
Okay, this is a tough one to narrow down, but let's start from the top. So, your banner is prime real estate. So, when people are landing on your profile, that and your photo are the two things that they are going to see. So, your banner is somewhere that a lot like there's no right or wrong way to do that. So, if you're working for someone, I would probably check what their rules are behind if they want your banner to align with the company, for example. That was when I worked at my old work, it needed to align with them. Or if it's your own personal brand, then I would highly recommend adding your name or adding your contact details or a tagline, perhaps. Anything that's kind of going to make you stand out, and it's going to be easy for your clients or consumers to understand what you do front and center. So the way, if you are kind of not that creative or tech savvy, I would highly recommend just going onto Canva, and they have so many different templates that you can edit yourself. So yeah, there's thousands on there. So banner, your profile photo definitely needs to be updated to the last like year or two of you, not a wedding photo with your wife or husband cropped out, or not a uni photo from 15 years ago, for example. So just making sure that that is professional, but however, it needs to align with you and your brand. So mine's of me laughing because that's, I want to showcase like a bold, approachable, charismatic kind of brand, right? Next would be your headline. So that's another thing that people instantly see. And it's not just when they land on your profile, it's when you're engaging with people in the feed as well, because people will see, like, if you are a marketing consultant or what your why is or things like that. So making sure your headline clearly articulates your role, but also your why or your unique value proposition and who you kind of target. So in the LinkedIn cheat sheet, I do go into a lot more detail with that, but it's really to kind of optimize your headline. So when people are searching for a marketing consultant or people that help leaders, for example, the more keywords that you use that are relevant to you in your industry, the more searchable you will be. So headline is super important there. Your About Me section is crucial as well. I find some people they write their About Me section in third person, which doesn't scream personal. So make sure this is written in first person. And also with your About Me section, it's definitely not about your day-to-day. So don't put your day-to-day in there. That's more kind of for your experience. So your About Me section should really clearly articulate that career story of, those pivotal moments in your career that got you to where you are. And also the credibility of like why people should trust you. So my previous leader would say facts, figures, and successes, because you can kind of just always talk about what you can do and things like that. But if you can't back it up with facts and how many years you've been in the industry or how many people you've helped, then it will fall flat and it will lack that credibility piece. And as well as just adding that personal touch as well. So say if I'm not sure if you follow him, but Shane Hatton, he's a really great example of a really clearly articulated and personalized About Me section. And it's because his personality is just fully evident throughout his whole profile. And as well, always have a call to action on your About Me section. So if people land on your profile, they know exactly how to contact you, if it's through LinkedIn DMs, through email, call, etc. One more feature that I will add for business owners and people working for someone else as well is the featured section. So this is my favorite feature on LinkedIn, because it acts as a portfolio piece pretty much. So if you're running your own business, you can add a link to your free masterclass, your lead magnet, your YouTube channel, your website, things like that. Say if you're an employee, you can add things like, say if you created an event for your company and you have a brand awareness video that you've helped create, add that to it. If a post has performed really well, add that post. Anything that's going to complement what you do and the result you get for people, add it to your featured section. So that's the things I would focus on.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So thinking through the types of content. So I know looking at your profile, so sometimes you'll do text only. Sometimes you're doing text along with maybe it's just a photo, or maybe it's a photo like with some graphic and text on it, and then also video as well. What do you see as the pros and the cons to each of those, and then the pros and cons to having a diversity of content overall within your strategy?
Look, I think it's always great to experiment with what works well for you. And obviously there is the algorithm that clearly favors certain type of content. So at the moment, text with an image and video are working really well. Video is in a trial and error phase at the moment. So it's trying to keep up with your TikTok and your Instagram and things like that, because the goal of LinkedIn is to keep consumers on the profile for as long as possible. And to do so is to make sure people have access to all the different content types. So the pros so text and image for me is probably my favorite personally, because I like writing. That's where my strength is. And I love taking photos as well. So I love sharing the photos that I'm taking and things like that to complement my posts. video for me is definitely something that I'm learning to like a lot more. And I think that just comes with confidence as well. Because I used to kind of fall into that perfectionist mindset where I needed to have these polished mindsets where a videographer would have to do them and things like that, where it's not about that. LinkedIn really are encouraging authenticity, and it just depends on your brand. So Shelley Johnson, for example, she creates, and Shane Hatton, they create incredible polished video content because it aligns with their personal brand and their business, right? However, some people might just be sitting in their car, or they might be sitting in their office, and they want to update people on the market at the moment, and they might just have an iPhone set up and edit it through CapCut. So there's no right or wrong answer. It just really depends on, you and your personal brand. The thing is with video, if you are learning, the con to that is it can be quite time consuming. And with carousels, I would say I'm not naturally, I'm more of a writer, words, copywriting kind of thing compared to graphic design. So I will always write content before I would probably use a carousel for it, because I just feel like on Instagram, I would probably do that more. But for LinkedIn, I just feel like my audience, my text and image and video content works quite well for me, but it does depend on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're a good example of that, because I'm like the complete flip. So though in terms of video, I struggle this doing like a solo face to camera, sit and talk about something. Like for me, where I'm most comfortable is getting to be in this environment where I get to sit with someone and have a really good conversation. We're connecting, we're adding value to the people that we're talking about, we're thinking about how we're adding value to others whilst having a great conversation. And that's where I feel really comfortable. And then the editing of that to make it into shorter clips for LinkedIn and other channels, I feel I've sort of built the skill now and I feel really comfortable in it. But as soon as I'm then trying to do it and I've pushed myself a bit to do it occasionally, just do a little speak to camera on a specific thing, and I'll write, but I'm just like such a bad writer. And it's like nearly every post I look back and I'm like, and because I've probably written it at like 5:30 in the morning, I find all my spelling mistakes that I've put in there and stuff,
Yeah.
and then I'm always going back and editing it.
Look, I highly
Yeah, so
recommend never post your first draft. So, say if there's a day where my advice would be for writing, if it's not probably your like biggest strength, is find a time in the day or the week when you've got the creative energy to kind of just write down some ideas. So say if like we're having this conversation, right, and you're like, oh, that's a really great a post I can create outside of like the video content. So the way that like my videos work and what works well for me is I don't plan necessarily like too much, but say like I had an event last week and the conversation I had with a lady that came up to me, that really struck a chord with me. So I wrote a text post on LinkedIn about it. Then I thought, I'm like, oh, okay, I could actually speak to camera about this and I'm going to practice. So I practiced and I created a video on this, and then I posted it on I posted on my Instagram then, but I might post it, recycle it and post it on my LinkedIn eventually. So what works really well is, if like for me is like writing out that content and I'm like, oh, actually I'm going to kind of rethink that conversation I had with that lady, and then I've had so many people reach out to me and they're like, love this resonates, like kind of thing. So yeah, I feel like at the moment social media is definitely favoring video. So it's really cool to kind of experiment and just like listen to the conversations that you were having, and you could definitely like, especially the variety of people that you're speaking to, and that it's awesome.
yeah, awesome. Well, so Abby, if people want to find you and get in touch and work with you, get coached by you, how could they find you?
So LinkedIn, obviously. So Abbey Naylor on LinkedIn. I also have an Instagram page _@_boldmood, and also my website, which is www.boldmood.com. So I do work with people one-on-one, which is incredible. And I also am a content writer. So I do write for busy CEOs and company pages as well on outside of that as well. So yeah, that's how you can contact me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being on.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Alex.